Well, welcome back to Tandem Radio Live, the good news on business. And our topic today is the business side of church planting. And that's what we're going to dig into right now, the dollars and cents business side. Because I know as business owners, we often think, first off, where's the money coming from? But we're going to get to that. There's a lot more to it than that. And we're here with our guest today, Pastor George Russ, who is the Executive Director of the Metropolitan New York Baptist Association and oversees over 230 churches in the metropolitan area. And Steve Allen, who is the lead church planter catalyst with the North American Mission Board's Send New York City team. So he's working in the area of planting churches and new churches and so forth. And it's amazing sometimes, I think, as diverse an area we have and as congested an area as we have, that we need more churches. But obviously, we talked about that in the first segment. It's very clear that we need it. Let's talk about the nuts and bolts, gentlemen. And again, I thank you for being here. Obviously, we talked the last segment about finding the right person, right? Now we get the right person. And the next question is, many people come to me and say, hey, I want to start a business. Like people come to you, Steve, say, I want to start a church. One of the first things I ask them is, do you have a business plan? So I understand it's kind of similar for you, right, Steve? So why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the areas I think that it's kind of a growth edge for us, Glenn. If I can back up half a step, and it'll actually kind of recap what we do. In essence, catalytically, we're trying to identify peoples or places where gospel access is lacking, and to connect those in a human resources sort of way with a planter. So we get the peoples and places front and the planter front, and the other front that we work on is the partnership development front. And that's a huge piece of what we do, and yet it always seems to be sort of a growth edge for us. Historically, our agencies, our North American Mission Board and our International Mission Board, have been our primary streams for channeling missions giving to new church plants, and those resource bases come from the offering plates of Southern Baptist churches worldwide, and are channeled and funneled through those two agencies. And so we still very much work with our North American Mission Board and International Mission Board to help channel those resources, stewarding the giving of individuals and churches. But there's a whole nother front that's been developing, and one that's really important to our work, and that is church-to-church sort of partnerships, and seeking to cultivate a resource base that helps draw upon churches that want to kind of go above and beyond just an offering plate sort of gift, to invest and flesh of their flesh, bone of their bone, help daughter or implant a new, really own a new community, not own, but help to entrepreneur or birth a new community of Christians into a place where gospel access is lacking. And so those are two really big pieces of it: the agency piece, the church-to-church piece. There are a number of other ways also, and quite frankly, a lot of our guys don't come to a lot of even the more entrepreneurial guys don't even necessarily come with a business understanding of the whole enterprise, and so that's where I say it's kind of a growth edge for us. It's learning how to help them succeed when our expertise on the whole is kind of lacking a bit in that area. But so the business plan is always a little bit fluid, and sometimes sometimes it's just better than others.
Yeah. I find it so important. I kind of relate this directly to when I advise people who want to start new businesses. I tell them, an idea in your head is in the supernatural. It's a spiritual aspect. You're thinking about it, you're excited about it, it's a dream. But if you want to bring it into the real world, the first thing you need to do is write it down. And when you write it down into a business plan, it's now brought it into the real world that other people can actually experience it and see it. And I think it's so important. So we have this situation where you vet this person, you find the right person, and now you're getting them acclimated to the business side of what's going on. And one of the questions you ask them is, do they have a business plan, right? So now when they don't have a business plan, what do you do there? I mean, is that something that you help them to develop?
Somewhat, we're somewhat prepared to really engage that. And again, I would say that's really, it's putting it generously I think to say it's a growth area for us, because so oftentimes it's heavily dependent upon external resources that are provided for a short period of time. An awful lot of guys who pursue this calling take it on really avocationally, and they do it without compensation, just realizing that that God's put it on their hearts to do that. Some of them envision it maybe someday as being their permanent vocation, but they do it bivocationally many times.
Interesting. And Pastor George, I want to hit on something that Steve said about the church's support, that churches come alongside. Obviously, you're overseeing 230 churches. plus, I'm sure. But a church comes to you and says, "Hey, we got a few extra dollars, and we're thinking of planting it into church planting." Is that something that is at the forefront? Is that something like you really drill down with the church? I mean, how does that impact you? I mean, that would be the thing where you now call Stephen, I know, but how does that impact you when you first hear that?
Well, a couple of things that the association that I lead does is that we actually budget for church planting, and we budget for that in specific groups. We have language groups or culture and ethnic groups that are organized and do their own church planting plans, and so we try to come alongside that and to provide some seed money to get that started. So we're very much involved in the resource development of church planting. We also have churches that want to specifically support a type of church, so we'll channel their funds to approved church planters.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also involved in enlisting other partners. And so we have churches from all over the country that call and ask, can you help us find the kind of planter or plant that would match where our people's gifts are. So we do that all the time. We're constantly entertaining guests and potential partners to look at planters. So we also develop planters profiles so that these churches can look at and see pictures of the planter and his family and where they are, what their people group affiliation might be, where they're located, what their plan might be to reach that particular community, and so then we try to match them together.
Well, let's take a little bit of a jump here. Let's talk about business owners and how they relate to this exactly. I mean, Steve, you mentioned that that you're on the edge working on this business plan concept. Pastor George, I know you and I have done a lot of legwork in the business community to entice business owners to understand the gospel better, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here, actually. So you kind of, in essence, planted the seed kind of when we started working together. But let's talk about the business ownership side, and I'll start with Pastor George. How do you feel that a business owner who's at a church can help in this effort?
Well, there's a lot of things that are important in church beginning, and one would be things like insurance, legal issues. Sometimes if a planter is in need of immigration type help, so there real estate agents to find potential sites for buildings, insurance. There's just a list of things that business people can contribute to the beginning of a church plant. We also have persons who just graduated law school, University of Buffalo, and is actually going to enter into an underserved community in New York City to try to provide like free legal services to that community that really needs it. So we have needs in education, after-school program, job training, computer literacy. So these are types of entry points into communities that we need to use the expertise of others to help us get that access to communities.
So if you really want to build a firm foundation, which you do, you don't want to open this church and close it 6 months from now, just like a business. You don't want to invest all the time and effort, open a business and close it 6 months from now. But it sounds to me like there's a lot of parallels there between starting a business and starting a church.
There sure is.
There is.
There is.
And Steve, what's your perspective on this? How do you feel about this? When you go into a church that says, "Hey, I want to start. We have some money. We want to help support, or maybe we have somebody that we want to back up, and there's a Spanish community or whatever in our area that's not being served, and we're ready to go." Do you look for the business owner and say, "Hey, you got any business owners involved in this that could really give us some insight?"
I would say we're probably learning to do that, and we're kind of backing our way into that, Glenn, and it's something that certainly some of us are beginning to recognize we have under-realized the value of. Because I can think of so many examples wherein a church, which is it's a voluntary enterprise, it's still a nonprofit enterprise. It costs money, to maintain facilities and to provide a salary for someone who will oversee that work, at least one salary. But it's a volunteer enterprise, and so churches do. I mean, the churches that seem to function best are churches that inspire and leverage the value of their volunteer base within their church. And some of the churches that do that best are the churches that tap into the giftedness of their business leaders and entrust some of the inner workings of that congregation to those in their communities who have business skills and aptitudes. And even while we're both, even while churches and businesses are both, have a vested interest in their own respective enterprises, the bleed across seems to come wherein, businesses and churches both have a vested interest in the success and health of their given communities. And so it just provides, kind of a great arena to work together for not just the success of that enterprise, but for, the good of the community.
I love you use the arena analogy because that's what it is. Many times business owners, and we have a break coming up, but and I love how we're coming out of this segment, and we'll wrap up in the next segment. But, business owners, I challenge you. There is an arena out there that you can be involved in that can touch on all your strengths and stir you like your business stirs you. And most business owners are out there. They're in it for the game as well as the gain. And they like what they're doing. They like the challenge. They like something new every day in the office. And planning a church can be a lot like that, right? I see the heads nodding. Yes, absolutely. So business owners, if you're out there listening right now and you're trying to think, well, what can I do to be effective in my church? Maybe this is one of the areas that you could be. And church planting can be a lot of fun. I mean, it really can, especially when God's in it with you, and He's going to give you the joy in your heart that you're going to feel strong about it and be motivated by it. And it will help you because it's a learning process as well. It's something unique. So I encourage all business owners that use your skills in that area, step up to the plate. And if that's something that's on your heart, or you see someone who has it on their heart, and you can come alongside and give them some good, solid business advice. What I'm hearing from both of you this morning is that you're receptive to hearing it, right?
Yes, we are.
And that's so important. You listen to Tandem Radio Live, and we're going to be back after these words. We got a lot more for you on business side of church planting. Well, welcome back to Tandem Radio Live. Just want to remind you about Ask Tandem. We have a new program that's just being launched that Cooper Ford is hosting, and we have a lot of fun with that. And if you haven't seen Ask Tandem, I'm not sure, do you have a Facebook page up for that, Cooper? Or is that, it is, all right, I knew it. Cooper had a Facebook page up for Ask Tandem. You got to check that out, and especially if you're a college grad or a college student who's looking to acclimate to business, Ask Tandem from a college student perspective can have a big impact on you. And I know we're doing that along with Cooper Ford, who's with Campus Crusade for Christ, and we just got a lot going on there. So we'll be doing a segment with both Steve Allen and Pastor George Russ right after the show. So make sure you get on Facebook and check out the Ask Tandem segments that we got out there on YouTube. And I'll tell you, if you know a college-age student or someone who just graduated college, you're going to love those segments. And we had a lot of fun. We did one in a restaurant the other day, which I thought was pretty good. Cooper, make sure you don't get that angle of me ever again, okay? But other than that, it's a good program. So we're talking about the business of church planning, and we're all about business here because it's the good news on business. And I just want to hit the scriptures one more time. I rejoice with those who said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Every once in a while I hear somebody say that you don't need to go to church to be a good Christian. And I'll tell you, I beg to differ. I think you do need to get involved in the church, whether there's one that maybe there's no access point for you, as Steve Allen mentioned, and you need to start one. Or there's a church in your area, which there probably is, that you need to get to and start building a foundation. But I think that's very important. And obviously, the Lord says in Psalms 122:1 that I rejoice with those who said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Luke 14:28, suppose one of you wants to build a tower, and we just talked about this. Will he not first sit down and estimate the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? Hey, if you have on your heart right now that you want to be in ministry or you want to go out and build a church, look at this very seriously, and you need to talk to people like Steve Allen or like Pastor George who have experience in it, and make sure that you estimate the cost, lest you drop the ball. In Acts 9:31, then the church throughout Judea, Galilee, and Samaria, which was much of the known world at the time, enjoyed a time of peace and was strengthened, living in the fear of the Lord. And I think this is an important part. Living in the fear of the Lord and encouraged by the Holy Spirit, it increased in numbers. I think those two things are so critical. And living in the fear of the Lord and encouraged by the Holy Spirit, I think you need both to make a church plant work, that's for sure, at least in my opinion. So we talked about church planting. We talked about vetting the person and finding the right person to lead. We talk about gathering people and how important the people groups are, and that they're heading in the right direction. And I know both of you have coached people on both sides of that fence. Let's talk about your personal experience in this and some of the specific stories about some things that have happened. I'm sure there's a ton of them that are, I know, Pastor George, we talked about many amusing stories, which like I said, we'll have you back and do a show on that alone. But Steve, let's talk about specifically an example you want to give of a church plant that happened that went the way you had hoped it would go, and maybe whatever that you want to fill in on us.
Yeah, well, my personal experience in Western New York, I was involved in as kind of the lead entrepreneur in 2 different church plants there, and one was my initial experience without any previous background, and the second actually was much more strategic and premeditated, and actually leveraged as you know the one of the key people involved in helping implant that church in that community was a business leader. Here in the New York City metropolitan area, where I've been working for 8 years now, I have the opportunity to work with guys from a lot of different cultures, a lot of different contexts, a lot of different demographics, and a couple of guys in particular come to mind. One in the Washington Heights, Inwood area of Manhattan is a young man by the name of Rich Perez, who's planting Christ Crucified Fellowship up there. Really, he's a young guy, a very sharp thinker. He's finding ways to engage, a hip hop generation in that community. And I happened to be in town the other day when I heard that Richard and his teaching pastor, Andy Mineo, who is a professionally recorded hip hop artist, was releasing his album, and they were doing a release party. And I went up to Washington Heights, Inwood, where I saw that night, a storefront, a cafe that had just graciously opened up their storefront to this new church, to Andy Mineo and to Rich, who was emceeing this event, and the room was just packed with mostly Hispanic young people. They're from Washington Heights, and what they were hearing. They said was dope, but it was very much.
Does that work, Luke?
It was very much, what they meant by that was, it was solid, it was right on, it was enjoyable, it was professional, it spoke to who they were, but it also communicated a clear Christian message about what that church proposes to do and be in that community, and how those young people can be involved in that.
There you go. Perfect example about hitting the right market, hitting the right demographic with the right leadership, absolutely, right? And being on target with that. And again, the Bible's very clear. You need to be all things to all people to be able to preach the gospel in a larger spectrum. And Pastor George, I'm sure you have many stories, but why don't you share one with us of maybe something where a business owner or an entrepreneurial type person got involved in church planning and did some unique things.
Great. Well, Glenn, through this whole conversation, Steve and I, we've worked so closely together in all of the aspects we have been discussing. And one that's in particular kind of exciting to me and very creative is a Spanish pastor in Queens who is a licensed contractor. He actually runs a business during the day of doing construction work around the city, has a crew, has helped us in a lot of ways in our own building. Has actually a vision and a heart for peoples around the world. So he and the Spanish pastors have decided to sponsor a young woman who's now in our area. She is pursuing a cosmetology degree or training, and they are going to actually use their contacts and resources to place her in a major Middle Eastern city as a business owner to open up a hair salon. And as a way to finance that, this pastor and friends of his have opened up a fast food Spanish restaurant, and the profits from that restaurant are actually going to help provide her living expenses while she is on the field overseas. So it's really interesting to see how business owners and how their creativity and how they can match things up like that and say, here's how we want to contribute to the beginning of a new congregation halfway across the world.
Well, I love how you said match that up. It's interesting because I know business owners, one of the common things I think with people in general when they go into a church, if they don't feel used of their gifts, they kind of fade away. They fade into the background at first, and then they don't even stay with the church because I feel that they're underutilized. And, you know, I think one of the things that I get when I hear, you know, the Bible say, feed my sheep, I think part of feeding people is to feed their gifts and to let them use those gifts and express themselves. And many times I find business owners feel stifled, especially in maybe more Orthodox churches where they come in for their 45-minute service and they leave. You know, they really don't get to use their business acumen in that application. But I love what you're saying. They took their skills and what they knew and what they did and said, hey, how can we make this for the glory of God? And
Yes.
Made it all work together. That is amazing. And I'm sure there are many, many other stories that you have about church planting. So, Steve, tell us from a business perspective, when it comes to the business side of church planting and church planting in general, business good?
It's going well, Glenn. I would have to say, you know, that there've been, you know, there's been some real traction in recent years. In fact, some of the research that's recently been published that was just completed last year, or actually the first segment of it was just completed last year, talked about how that evangelical adherence, and what I mean by evangelical, Bible believing, gospel teaching type of ministry has actually grown in the New York City metro, and the evangelical adherence has grown from less than 1% to greater than 3% over the last 20 years, and that's based upon actual survey evidence of a significant proportion of Manhattan, and it's an ongoing research, but the same study revealed that 40% of the churches in existence today in that 120, 130 block swath of Manhattan, 40% of those churches that are in existence today have been planted since 2001.
Well, it's amazing, and I'm glad to hear business is good. And like I told you, the segments go fast, and we're already out of time. So I want to thank Pastor George for coming in and Steve Allen for coming in. I wish you much success. Our prayers go out to you and your efforts, because it's a powerful effort. And I'm glad to hear business is good for you, because one of my companies serves churches, so I love to hear that on both sides, and especially in today's market where there's so much doom and gloom. You know, my wife says, it's refreshing to hear you come home from work and you say the company's growing. Because she's a Christian counselor, and she hears all the time about the difficulties out there. But I'm glad to hear from you that business is good, and there's great opportunity there for many of us. And I'm glad that the both of you are here today, and I appreciate what you're doing. Keep in mind that you can reach George Russ at the Metropolitan New York Baptist Association, and if you Google that, their website comes right up. And you can also reach Steve Allen at the North American Mission Boards, right? Send New York City team, and both of them can be reached through a link on our website, tandemradio.com. So again, gentlemen, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you so much, Glenn. It's been fun.
Thank you all for listening today. It's been another fun show. We're here every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time talking about the good news on business. If you have any questions or anything you'd like us to help you with, info@tandemradio.com. Send an email at info@tandemradio.com, and we'll possibly get you on the air or answer your question for sure and get it back to you. Have a blessed day. Thank you for the team for being in today, Cooper, Lucas, and welcome, Allie. We got so much more to do in the months ahead, and we're excited about it because God's behind it. The good news on business, Tandem Radio Live, here every Saturday morning.